Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Transatlantic Call-In Show. This is the place where you get to call in and talk to two trans people about all your questions of anything and everything trans-related. So, if you are a parent of a trans kid and you want to ask something that's maybe like a little uncomfy, you can ask that here. If you think that trans kids shouldn't be getting evidence-based medical care, you could call us about that. It might not go well for you, but you could give it a shot. We'll happy to talk to you all. I am your host today, Arden Hart, and with me is a special guest, Hannah Reloaded. Hannah, hey, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. Hi, everyone. I'm Hannah. How's it going?
We're super excited to have you. If you want to let the audience know who you are, where they can find you, and what kind of stuff you do, that'd be great.
Sure. I'm Hannah Reloaded. There are links in the chat. I'm a streamer. I've been online for a very long time. By internet years, I'm ancient, I promise. And I primarily talk about politics, current events. I look into conspiracy theories and debunk them. I look into the psychology of conspiracy theories. And, I'm trans, so that tends to come up. One of the reasons I'm here.
What? Awesome. Well, you guys should definitely go check out her links. That's all in the description, and they're getting occasionally dropped in chat and stuff like that by mods. So definitely go check that out. So we are going to get into, quick. We're going to do our polls. But before we do that, I have a job to do. Almost forgot. I have a responsibility to promote some of the other stuff that's going on here on the line. While Transatlantic is inarguably the best show on the entire network, there are other shows. If you have nothing to do with your time, you could kind of check them out. For example, this Sunday at 2 p.m., we have the Sunday show with Eric from Skeptics and Scoundrels and Matt Dillahunty. They're going to be, I just said his name like the way the people who drive him crazy say his name, Matt Dillahunty. That's a place where you can call in and talk about theist questions. So if you are a Christian or a believer, you can go and have a nice little debate with them there. On Monday on Skep Talk with Forrest Valkai will be, I believe it's pronounced France a lot. She's a science communicator on TikTok. So that will be Forrest guests on Monday. Sciencey stuff, skeptic science information. That's at 6 p.m. Central Time. And then next Wednesday, we'll be back with Matt Dillahunty on The Hang Up. And we don't have a guest sorted out, and we don't even have February availability for TACA sorted out, so I got no info for you there. But last thing really quick, you can either support us on patreon.com/calltheline. That is the best way to support this network and the best way to get us towards LineCon, hopefully at the end of the year. And we have merch live on linemerch.com. That's linemerch.com. There is a cool all-over print hoodie that's really nice. People are saying it's super comfy. There's a yellow and a pink one. They've got the YGH and GFY for our little channel inside jokes there. And yeah, you guys should go check all that stuff out. But let's get into this week's polls. Well, actually, last week's polls first. So last week's poll read, do you think laws restricting bathroom access for transgender students is a violation of federal law or their constitutional rights? With 7.2 thousand votes, 80% said yes and 20% said no. Now, I looked at the comments a little bit before we got here, and it seems to me that the 20% who said no, not all of them for sure, but a good portion of them were kind of arguing that it may not, in fact, be a violation of their constitutional rights, but that doesn't mean that it is a good thing or a thing we should support or a law that is worth investing any time or effort into. So I think probably the number of people who are against these laws is much higher, and if that was the question, it might have gotten us a different result. But yeah, did you have any thoughts on this? I know we kind of mentioned before the show as related to that Supreme Court case, and I don't know how familiar you are with that.
I'm not very familiar with it. This is a difficult question because part of me wants to be in and I feel terrible for saying this, in the 20% category just because I don't know federal law well enough.
Sure.
But obviously I feel that people should be able to use the bathroom that fits their gender identity, but I don't know the legal thing. Then again, though, if we're considering trans being a protected class, as I think it should be, any of the other things that are, wouldn't that kind of fall under that category? I'm iffy about it. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think this is why the Supreme Court weighing in or not weighing in is actually really interesting, because the inclusion of trans people under the is it the 14th Amendment, the protection of protected groups. So I know under Obama they had changed the definition of sex to include trans people, and then Trump tried to switch it back, and then Biden's kind of switched it back again or something, or they're just arguing that, you know, even if we say trans people are their sex assigned at birth, they're still discriminating against them on the basis of their sex in these situations. So it would seem to me that you could make a pretty strong argument that it is, but that's kind of why I think the Supreme Court weighing in or not is so interesting, because is it that they're waiting for a stronger case to just really hammer out, you know, hammer away trans people's rights? Or do they maybe think that the argument for our, you know, constitutional rights is so strong that it's not even worth taking up? It's just going to embolden trans activists or something along those lines. It's hard to say. Yeah. You had something?
I was just going to say, I don't know, because that is a consideration. Like, I've seen some of the decisions that have come out of the court in the past, like, year or so, and sometimes I'm like, wait, what? Because even then, there'll be times where I'm like, Amy Coney Barrett or whatever will, you know, of course, be on the shitty side of this, but then sometimes she won't. I am confused, because obviously the court is currently packed with, like, ideologically driven justices, and to an extent that's always a thing. I don't think there's such a thing as like some sort of objective like version of the law. It always requires interpretation. That's what the judiciary is. But like, come on. I don't know. It's just frustrating to me, and I am scared that they're waiting for some case to be like, all right, this won't affect people we do like, and this will affect trans people, so let's take this case and fuck them.
Yeah, it does kind of feel like that a lot of times, but I totally hear what you're saying. I don't want to get off on too much of a sidetrack, because sometimes when I do that, people try to call in about politics, and the only topics we take on the show are trans-related topics. But on the border case, I believe Amy Coney Barrett sided with the Biden administration on that, saying that, you couldn't stop federal agents from taking down the razor wire, which is really interesting. I don't really understand her worldview that well. But anyway, this is last week's poll. If you want to get involved in the discussion on this week's poll, it reads, do you think this year Republicans will break their record on proposed anti-LGBTQ bills in 2024? I said this year in 2024, redundancy. But yeah, so
historically it's important. They'll know what year you're talking about.
Right. So I was looking at an article. I don't know if I have the exact numbers of the bills, but last year there was around 500 proposed, and only 83, I think, went into effect, which is, I think that's the part that doesn't get talked about enough, is that how many of these laws end up actually failing, not even getting to like a court case. But this year they're already at like nearly 300, and it's not even January. So it is a little concerning. And, you know, even if they're only getting, 10% through or something like that, that's still a lot of bills that affect a lot of people's lives. So I don't know how much you've seen of that, or if you have any thoughts you want to jump in on there.
I think a lot of it's an election year thing. A lot of it's them being like, we got to show our constituents we're doing something about this problem we manufactured. Like, I don't know if they're thinking of it in those terms. That's my cynical way of interpreting it, though, is basically, we got to look like we're doing something. Are we going to materially help people and make sure that they have, their needs? Nah, we'll scaremongery about trans people for the next 12 months.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about it.
I mean, and that hasn't seemed to have proven super well for them when it comes to elections. I think a lot of the elections where they really hammered home on that were elections that they lost. So it is interesting. Yeah. I can tell they're not ready to give up this football yet. And with gay marriage, they didn't until the Supreme Court happened. And they still haven't really. There's still laws that they draft from time to time. But it is interesting. It feels in some ways like the court of public opinion has already weighed in on this, and whether or not they accept trans people, seems like the general consensus is, not my monkey, not my circus, not my monkeys, or whatever. Like, they don't want to weigh in on this problem. They don't care, the general American person. And it is interesting. But that was our last week of polls in this week. So if you want to go comment on that, that is on the community tab that is ready for you. We have lines filling up, and we are ready to jump in. You ready to take some callers, Anna?
I am very ready. I'm excited.
Right. So first up today, we've got Ben in Texas. Pronouns are he, they. Ben, you are live on the line. What is going on?
Hello.
Hey, how you doing, Ben? What do you want to talk about today?
All right. So, um, recently I've kind of started questioning my gender and everything and all that fun stuff. And I've been in a relationship with someone for over 6 years now, and I'm just wondering, like, how do you even broach that subject with them? Because I mean, there'd be a whole lot of change in their life too, and I don't want that to just be like, oh, hey, surprise, I may be trans or whatever.
Yeah, Hannah, do you have thoughts on that?
I a little bit. So when I first came out, I was with someone who I had been with for, I don't know, maybe 6 years at that point. And I was in a position where I had to have that conversation too. And it's not an easy one to have because, as you know, it's loaded with a lot of feelings because, of course, you have a right to be yourself and explore that, but at the same time, you're afraid of, how your self affects the people close to you. I think the best way you can do it is honestly and with openness and compassion, and hope that that is returned, because if it's someone that you've been with for that long, I would hope that no matter how they feel, and it will probably be a stressful time for them because change and uncertainty is a scary thing for anyone. I don't know. I think that it's scary, but openness and honesty is the first step to whatever comes next. And I think that's important.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's worth it.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. I think having difficult with conversations with partners is never something that I think anyone looks forward to, right? I think all of us want to be loved and accepted and supported, and the fear of all those things falling through is very real, and I think can put off maybe us doing the best thing for ourselves for a really long time. I was not with anyone when I started my transition, which is in a lot of ways was a blessing because, I didn't have to weigh that consideration. But I think I agree. I think ultimately you are, if you don't pursue what you think you want to because your partner might have concerns, that's not right. And I also think it is in some way unfair to your partner because it denies them the opportunity to know who you really are and who they're really dating and if they actually want to be with who you really are.
Speaking on that, the relationship I was in that I was talking about, by the way, I'm no longer in that relationship, and that's okay. It didn't end right there. There was a period where just when you are changing and being more honest with yourself, if that changes, sometimes those relationships can change. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Me and her were not right for each other in the first place. It's just that honesty, I do want to let you know, like, it can change relationship dynamics. I'm not saying it's going to be for the worse. One would hope it's for the better when everyone's being honest with each other about who they are. But, there is that potential change. But that change is good regardless because you're being honest with yourself, and that's what's important. Your happiness is going to flow from that, as well as the happiness of this other person. At least that's how I see it. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's definitely scary, Ben. How are you feeling after hearing some of that?
I mean, it's part of it is almost a little disheartening. I mean, like, yeah, the best thing is to be completely honest with her about it, but it's and I don't think my biggest fear is her reaction. Almost, it's. I mean, when you're with someone for over 6 years, you really know their family and everything, and I mean, her family's fairly conservative, and so there's definitely more fears from that too, and how that could play out.
Yeah, that is an incredibly difficult situation. I mean, I think, most trans people go through this sort of experience in one way or another, but ultimately, I think the ground a lot of us fall on is that that is a risk worth taking, that like what's, better for you, like being happy and fulfilled internally, or being happy and fulfilled that your partner hasn't abandoned you because of, maybe the judgment of their parents or anything like that. It's difficult. And I think really ultimately the only thing that can be done is to alleviate the distress you're feeling. I mean, like obviously you could bury it and try to stay in the relationship, but I don't think that's really tenable. I think really the only thing you can do is just be straight up. Like, I've been having these feelings. I don't necessarily know exactly where it's going to land yet, but I do know I want to do something about it and let the chips fall where they may. I wish I could give you the magic set of words that would make everyone understand and love you and support you and not judge. But unfortunately, we don't live in a culture that is super navigable for trans people in that way. And so I think that that's your best option, is to just try to be honest. But I realize that's not exactly comforting or maybe useful. Probably something you already knew and just kind of needed somebody to repeat at you.
I will say this.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
No. I was just kind of agreeing with what Arden was saying.
I do want to say, even though, sorry if what I said sounded depressing, by the way. I want to be clear.
You're good. Sometimes it's fine.
The journey can be difficult, but I'm glad I took that journey, if that makes sense. I think it's irresponsible of me to not say, yes, there are difficult emotional things, but I am so happy personally for me that I did these things and became the person that I'm comfortable being, if that makes sense. Everything else was worth it. Navigating personal relationships is always difficult, but for me it was worth it, and that's all I can say. I'm much happier now than I ever was. So
yeah, absolutely. I do tend to maybe also hone in on the, you're asking the question about like, how do you have this conversation? And maybe I can get a little negative because I'm honing in on that. But I think Hannah's absolutely right that while it is difficult, while bad outcomes can happen, it is all so worth it to feel good in your skin and to be surrounded by people who validate you and support you and see you for you, and to have that, to know like the world where you are yourself and you have that supportive partner and their family, it does exist and you can get there. Even if it's like maybe through a potentially really difficult period of time where maybe, it's not with the partner you're with currently, or maybe it will be great. And maybe your fears are totally blown out of proportion. You just never really know until you start taking those steps.
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely hoping for the latter of those possibilities, and I'm just anxious for no real reason. It'll be fine if I can actually talk to her about it. So, I mean, that's definitely the hope. Yeah.
Well, I wish for the best for you, Ben, on this. And I hope that, if you have that conversation and maybe, it, however it goes, if you think you have like advice to call back and tell us, wow, this thing you guys said was so off base and I need to make sure people hear that. Or if you think something was helpful, I think the whole point of this show is education for the audience. And I think, if you have, however this experience goes for you, we'd love to hear back from you and know how it goes. And hopefully maybe some people can apply that to their own life to help have better conversations about these sorts of things. Is there anything else you wanted to add on to that, Ben, before we go on to the next caller?
I will just say thank y'all for having this show. I mean, I'm fairly new to watching it live, but main reason, y'all make my Thursdays so much better at work. I'm finally able to call because I have Thursday off this week. And I mean, that's 2 hours or so that my work is a whole lot easier because I get to listen to the show, and y'all are amazing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really wish for the best for you. I realize how difficult of a situation you're in. So thank you for calling, and I'm glad the show's been able to help you.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Ben. Bye.
Bye.
Starting off on a little bit of a somber note, but that's okay.
Yeah.
It's part of the trans experience, and that's, one of those reasons. Oops, sorry, that's the wrong title, because that's who was on last time I used.
I was going to say my identity's changed. I didn't remember doing another name change, and I would. It was hard.
There we go. That's fixed. All right, we've got full lines right now, so I think we're just going to keep cruising. We're going to just take these in the order that they came in, because everyone's kind of seems like they're playing on the same level today. So we're going to bring in Robert. Pronouns are he, him in Ohio. Robert, you are live on Transatlantic. What's going on? What do you want to talk about today? Hello, Robert.
Hi.
Are you?
Sorry,
There
can
we
you guys
go.
hear me okay?
Yep, now we can. What's going on?
Awesome. Sorry about that. It was, I had the thing play on YouTube and everything. I have it closed out now. So, by the way, at the end of this call, I'll ask you guys if you have any resources to learn more about this kind of stuff. That way I'm not, calling back in every single week with a new question so we can get to, other callers, that sort of thing. But real quick, I guess I've just been reading on Wikipedia and the World Health Organization website. Those are the two places that were recommended to me. And I'm not really sure I understand when someone refers to a gender, what gender they are, and that's different than sex. When someone refers to what gender they are, how do they determine what gender they are or identify as, or whatever the correct terminology for that is, I guess. And one more thing, the reason why I'm kind of confused about that, and you guys can correct this if it's the wrong explanation that was given to me, is that gender has to do with how you present yourself and feel. And, we have stuff like gender roles. I'm in America, we have, an idea of gender roles. If you look at traditionally how things are, the man does this in the house and the woman does this. She takes care of the kids, she, whatever. But I guess I'm not understanding, because a lot of things that were presented to me, gender is about, if you feel feminine or masculine and stuff. Because in my perspective, I'm a man. I call myself a man. I was born as the male sex, and I can do things that people think are feminine, like go into a spa or whatever, or I like cleaning, or someone wears clothes that are very bright, kind of dressy, or whatever. Or even some guys wear dresses or some kind of thing. I guess what's the difference between just that and saying, if you identify as a woman, the gender woman, I guess if that's the right terminology, how is that different than just being just a man or woman that has certain traits that people identify with the other gender, which I understand those gender roles are, mainly constructed for culture and stuff. Sorry about that long introduction, but you guys can go ahead.
No worries. Thanks for calling, Robert. So I think there's a few different things to parse out here. I would completely agree that a man can wear a dress, and it doesn't mean he's necessarily not a man. Just being feminine is not sufficient in and of itself in most cases to determine a gender. That is more of about gender expression in that case. I have described gender, and this is not mine, although I know I've heard other people on the line say they heard it from me or whatever. I consider gender a durable psychological construct. It's something that is relatively stable for most people over the course of their life. It seems to exist within the mind. I mean, in as much as your personality and handedness and all of these other sorts of things that manifest in reality are a product of your mind at work. So I would say gender identity is that durable psychological process, whereas gender expression is more of like the cultural language that we use to communicate that gender identity to people. So like for me, I have long hair and I wear makeup. I don't consider those things to be the determining factors that made me a woman. I knew I was a woman based on my feelings and my experiences when I was trying to interact in society and people were perceiving me as a man, and the dissonance that caused in conjunction with, in some ways, I wouldn't describe it as euphoria personally, but the peace that I felt when people were treating me as a woman, and I was like, yes, that is definitely right. And the hair and the makeup are just sort of a way that I can say, like, okay, I mean, as a trans woman, you know, sometimes if you go through male puberty, you can have some male features or masculine quote unquote features. And sometimes these feminine expressions can help you communicate to people, yes, I know I might have masculine feature X, Y, and Z, but I'm communicating my gender to you through my clothes and my hair and my makeup. I'm not saying that that's what makes me a woman, but those are ways that I can communicate that to you. But Hannah, do you have any another spin on that, or any thoughts?
Just in terms of like personal experience, when you mentioned the phrase like a sense of peace, that's such a great phrase to, I think, explain it to some people, because a lot of people do talk about gender euphoria, which is a thing. But I think for me personally, the biggest piece is I feel more comfortable being identified that way. Like from a young age, I knew, you know, people looking at me and seeing a boy or like using those pronouns for me, I never liked that. And just, I know that the other like side of that in terms of like a bimodal gender, like that's what makes me feel comfortable, is being identified as a woman and using she, her and stuff. I don't know. It's very subjective, but like, that's what it is. It's what makes me comfortable.
I think there's a tendency to assume that because there's a subjective, you know, self-assessment element going on, that it's therefore not as valid as, you know, something that you can maybe get like a blood test on, right? Mm-hmm. But I think when we really start looking at other aspects of medicine and health, we'll find that a lot of things are indicated almost exclusively through self-report of a subjective experience, like pain, for example. You know, like your doctor's not going to run a blood test and be like, but do you really feel pain? I mean, maybe in some situations, if you have some sort of other indication that you might be trying to manipulate them to get, you know, prescription drugs or something, there might be cause for them to question you. But in a lot of cases, especially with like other like psychiatric states, it's all self-report. And I don't think that's necessarily a weakness, because we can also do things like, now, I'm not saying that being trans is like a mental illness or a medical thing necessarily, but when it comes to like gender euphoria, right, there are strict criteria for what qualifies as gender dysphoria in the DSM. There's like persistent and consistent expression of this sensation that the gender I was born in is wrong for me, and this other gender makes me feel right and okay. It doesn't, you know, it's not like it makes me feel like I'm high all the time or whatever. It just makes me feel like I can be a normal person and function in society. And not only that, but we have like reliable treatment outcomes for people. When people present with gender dysphoria, we can say, with almost like 97% of people who present with gender dysphoria benefit from taking hormones or socially transitioning, and changing their documents makes their life easier, and they run into less hurdles because they're not being outed against their will. I do understand, especially, you know, as a science-minded skeptic person, the temptation. I did this to myself for years before I transitioned, to be like, but how do I know I'm a woman, right? Really, what I came to was whether or not I'm a woman seems irrelevant at first. I know that being a man feels fucking wrong, and I want to grow out my hair, get laser hair removal, start wearing makeup, and having people call me she, her. And along the way, that felt so right that it was like, yes, this was the right decision. I am confident now that I am trans and I am a woman, and that's the outcome of that. Does that make sense, Robert? Or do you feel like we got to your question or missed it? I'd love to know how you feel about all that.
Yeah, something you said, kind of like at the end there. So, and I was also listening to, I forget which show from the line it was on, but Matt Dillahunty was on there, and the caller was saying something about like, why do you have pronouns in your bio on Twitter and on your, the call-in shows? Why do you ask the pronouns? And, he was saying like, so everyone feels inclusive, because most people, they present the pronouns the way that, you'd expect them to, based on like our concept of this is what a man looks like, this is what a woman looks like. But some people prefer to use different pronouns or have a different identity. Then, you can't just look at them and know that. So he said, like, that's how you make everyone inclusive, because then you're normalizing it. And the caller said something like, well, we should just have a genderless society and we all have the same pronoun, neutral pronoun, and everyone goes be who they want. Or he said something to that effect. And Matt was like, well, that doesn't sound very realistic. So until that happens, I'm going to do this, and we're going to have these pronouns instead. So is basically, if I'm understanding, like, it kind of makes sense when I'm thinking about it, that in America, I don't know where you guys are located, but I'm, in America, for me, we have, 99% of people are going to, probably say they're male or female, or I'm sorry, they're man or woman. That's the terms they use. So because, like you, Arden, I believe it was Arden who said this, for example, and Hannah, you said this too, that when you was a kid, people would say you were a boy, or they would say he, and that would just like feel wrong to you. You know what I mean? So because you have this feeling inside, the way you express that, you have a certain image of yourself. And because we live in a gendered, and I'm assuming American, I don't know. I mean, if you're in other countries, they have, gender roles and stuff like that as well. So wherever you're at, you're like, no, how I feel on the inside is different than how you are calling me by this pronoun. So I'm going to use she, her pronouns. And, some people change their first or last name and make it kind of feel more representative of who they are, I guess, on the inside. Is that kind of what you're saying? Like, when you say, like, you can't look in a microscope and be like, this person's a woman just because they have these chromosomes or whatever, because maybe they present themselves in a way that typically in our culture, we'd look at that and say, oh, that's a woman. Not just that's a feminine guy or whatever, but that's a woman. This is a girl or whatever. Is that kind of what you're saying? Like, the best way you can kind of express how you feel on the inside and the kind of person you see yourself as? We have, like, we can keep calling you this pronoun, or you can use the pronoun that you're comfortable with. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Sorry if that was like offensive, or like, no, I'm not trying to, say something silly.
No, you're doing great. Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. I mean, like, I think you called last week, right, Robert?
I called what?
Did you call last week? You were here last week?
Yeah. And that's why yes. I said, at the end of the call, if I can get like some resources to read up on, or like where I can kind of dive into this from someone who knows very little and understand more, because otherwise, sure, I'll be reading throughout the week, and I'll call in every single week and, clog up the lines and stuff, and I don't want to do that.
That's all right. Honestly, Robert, I like talking to you, because even though you don't necessarily fall on the same page as us on these issues, you're very respectful, and you're actually just looking to get information and not to frame things in some kind of way, which I really appreciate. I think that's pretty much a good way to describe it. Like, I don't really object to people saying I'm a male or female or anything like that. Like, I think it's just true that at a population level, humans are sexually dimorphic, but it's just like when you hone in on that, it's like, well, actually, sexual dimorphism isn't quite as simple as we'd like to think in, basic biology. It actually turns out that it can be a little bit more complex than that. And that's how you have species that evolve into different methods of sexual reproduction and things like this. It's... I don't know. Yeah, I think you've got it pretty much on the mark, and I don't really have much to change about that. But I definitely have a couple of good resources that I think if you type in a comprehensive defense of trans people Reddit, you'll get a thread from a user called Musicotic, and they have compiled a massive list of studies. It's a little outdated now. I don't know if they've updated it at any time recently, but like 5 years ago, it was like one of the best, most up-to-date compilations of trans research papers. And they go through a lot of the common arguments and common myths and what the data actually say about that. There are quite a lot of new studies that have come out, but I no longer have a JSTOR account because I'm not in college, so I'm not up to date on all the hip new research. But my understanding is that, by and large, medicine and science is pretty good nowadays, and the assumed direction that we had about 10 years ago is pretty much the same. There's just more information and more confirmation so far, and that's just kind of how science goes. I mean, it's you're never going to have this is definitely the right thing 100% of the time for all the people who fit into this category. It's just not how medicine or science or people work. The best thing you can do is, create a risk-benefit analysis and say, the majority of people who are in this situation benefit from this kind of stuff. So let's make that stuff available to them so that way they can live a healthy life and be productive members of society and be happy and contribute. I think Musicotic is a good place to go. There's a couple of people on Twitter too who regularly post new stuff. I don't know them super well personally or interact with them, but Erin in the Morn, who's been on this show with Katy, she posts like new data all the time and new bills that are getting put up. Also, I think you could, for me, I think for most people also, sorry, I'm ranting. I'll be done soon, I promise. I think for most people, you don't need to know all of the science and all the data. I think what you can do, and it's totally valid to do, it's not actually a fallacious appeal to authority, like some people like to frame it. If you find that giant list of like every major medical organization within the United States that has said something to the effect of, upon review of the evidence, it seems to be the case that trans people are valid and benefit from this kind of care and they deserve to not be discriminated against, that's totally fair, because you're not saying this is true because they said so. You're saying this is true because the experts who have reviewed the science have come to this conclusion. And so I don't have the time or the know-how to read through those papers, but I think it's completely fair to accept scientific consensus on issues, even if you don't personally know the science. I don't know all the science on gravity or evolution, but I accept that theories of gravity and evolution are probably pretty coherent considering they're reliable and they've been tested over and over again and they're taught in medical books. But sorry, I'll shut up now. Hannah, do you have anything you want to add there?
Sorry, I was just thinking because you mentioned the gravity thing. I cover flat earthers a lot, and I'm like, oh God.
Right.
I don't know what shape the Earth is because I've never, looked at it from up in the space or whatever. But I know all the people that actually understand space travel a whole lot more than I ever could. They all seem to be pretty confident that it's round. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's a good way to put it, yeah.
And that is the skeptical position, Robert. I don't necessarily know, and they may in fact be wrong. But if it comes out that they're wrong and we have better science that shows a different model is more accurate, I will then adopt that model because I don't have the time to be a physicist and an evolutionary biologist in this life. I can only pick a few specialties, and it's totally acceptable to accept that the experts have come to a certain conclusion. They have more data than I do. They're probably correct. But if you find out they're wrong, then update your worldview. Okay, turns out I was wrong. The globe is actually shaped like a pear or whatever it was that fucking Columbus thought. So I don't know. Anyway, thank you
It's
for
actually a
calling,
historical myth.
Oh, okay. That probably is true. I just, Was there anything else you wanted to add on there, Robert, though?
Sorry. I found when you said about the comprehensive defense of trans people, I found that on Reddit. I bookmarked that.
Nice.
I bookmarked a Reddit called Ask Transgender, and so that looks like a place I could maybe I can ask questions there and stuff, but like you said something, Arden, I believe it was Arden, I'm not good with voices or anything, but we don't agree on everything or whatever. I'm still learning this stuff and figuring it out. I know when I was a kid, nobody talked about trans people or whatever. Maybe that was just because where I grew up in and everything. But in the last few years, it's really become a kind of a hot thing where, lots of places online that I've frequented and, people in person, you have a lot of people saying like, oh, where's this trans stuff that came out of nowhere? It's just bad, blah, 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 that sort of thing. And like, only thing I can see is like, I have my beliefs. I want to live my life a certain way, but, I feel like a lot of people are confused about how to be, how to communicate with each other sometimes.
Yeah.
And a lot of people that are, living a trans life, they seem to be really hurting in a lot of ways. And that seems to be accurate from, the calls I've listened to on here and listened to people's stories and everything. So like I said, I don't know what all the facts are or everything like that. I don't know, when I talk to a trans person, always the best way to, talk to them. And that's part of the reason why I'm reaching out, because, I don't want to be disrespectful to people that I meet in person or whatever. But, we still agree that, people are hurting and they're not having a good time, and, people are upset, and, I don't know, whatever I can do from someone that has no idea about really what it's like to be a trans person or whatever. Like, I just want to learn more and be like, hey, even if we don't agree, like even if I'm in my church or whatever, and we don't agree with certain things, like, homosexuality is a thing we talk about sometimes. Like, you don't have to agree with someone's lifestyle to love them and that sort of thing. Like, I know lots of people that live different lifestyles, and I've got all sorts of different friends, like, Muslim friends and stuff. And I don't know, it's just, it's something, I don't know if it's just when I've grown up or something that's been happening more and more, like online, like people talking past each other, and in person, people just becoming so polarized, I guess. You know what I mean?
I do.
And nobody's
I do.
like, I won't say nobody, but from where I'm at, it doesn't seem like anybody's saying like, hey, like, we don't have to sit here and talk and come to every single point of agreement. If someone like a certain internet guy that I really don't like, but he gets brought up a lot, and I won't even say his name, he's very anti-trans. And, if someone has their own ideas in their head about trans people, that's one thing, but like, trans people are people, so when you talk to them, don't treat them as like a science project or whatever, and that's what I'm trying to understand more, so I don't accidentally come off and say something like that, because, if someone's already hurting and having problems with, the way they're feeling, I wouldn't want anything I say to make them feel any worse about themselves. You know what I mean? So that's why I appreciate you guys letting me talk to you, and, I'm still going to look all this stuff on Reddit that you told me about and
Sure.
try to understand more, because I need to do some research and stuff, Does that make sense?
I definitely, it's unfortunate because the show, we kind of explicitly do not allow conversations that aren't specifically related to trans issues, but I would really be curious to talk to you about your religious beliefs after that, because that was very interesting, and I have so many thoughts and questions, but unfortunately, we'll have to save it for another show or another time. But thank you so much, Robert, for calling in. This has been a very respectful conversation, and I appreciate it, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your night.
Great. I appreciate you both, and Katie last week as well. I hope you guys have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
You too.
Bye. Alrighty. Yeah, oh man, I have so many thoughts and questions on his belief system. I'm very, very curious. But
I will say this. I almost never see people who disagree, who don't, how do I put this? I almost never see people trying to engage in good faith.
Yes.
And I appreciate that. And I appreciate anyone who tries to learn openly. That's good.
That's why I've given Robert a lot of props. I mean, I think we could have potentially a very heated, argumentative conversation over religion, but I appreciate, like I've said before, that he is calling in to learn and to understand, and not necessarily with the goal of, I have this preconceived set of beliefs. I want to argue with you about whether or not they're a reflection of reality. He just wants to understand, which is great. But I do want to remind you guys that at the end of the show, we will read out super chats of $5 or more. So if you are too afraid to call in, because we're very scary and mean, that is a way that you can communicate with us. We actually have maxed out lines, so I think I'm going to close the lines right now because I'd like to get to everyone that we have left. And it's already been 45 minutes into the show, so that's going to be a lot of time. I'll leave like 2 lines open in case people drop or something. But let's take up next Robin in Washington. Pronouns are she, her. Robin wants to know if there's any value in studying biological causes of gender and sexuality. Robin, you are live on the line. What is going on? Why don't you pitch us your topic from your perspective?
Hi. Yeah. So, recently a clip from a professor giving a lecture about psychology was going around on Reddit, and he was talking about like differences in the brain between men and women, and how like those changes seem to be consistent with like trans women versus cis women, and then trans men versus cis men. And I thought it was really interesting. But then I noticed that the reaction from a lot of the queer community seemed to be like, no, this is invalidating for non-binary people. This is like a slippery slope to what's that, phrenology and eugenics. And I was like, oh, this seems like an overreaction, personally. I was just curious what your opinions were on that.
I've talked a lot. Hannah, you want to jump in on this one?
People are rightfully so very invested and concerned about this kind of thing because people in the trans community get a lot of shit in general. However, I would say that I don't think there's anything wrong with genuine investigative inquiry into stuff like that. I think that's good in general to learn more about anything, as long as it's not applied for bad things. Like, I feel like that's quite a slippery slope to for anyone to say, like, we're investigating this thing, therefore eugenics are right around the corner regarding this thing. I understand the thought. I understand the concern of, like, there was a sci-fi show that ran for 1 season called Century City, and it was future court cases, and something like this happened where, you know, oh, in the future they can genetically edit this or that, and they found in this show a gay gene. So there was like a whole thing about people intentionally taking that out of their prospective children, and that being considered like a genocide. So, like, in terms of speculative future things and like that, I get it, but I don't think investigating potential causes of things, if there even is one in the way that we're discussing, that's fine. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that inherently is a bad thing at all, and only if people use it for bad things is it bad.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I know we've talked before on this show about the value of like trying to identify the cause of being trans or something. And I think like gender identity and sexuality are so multivariate that I think it's going to be pretty hard to nail down like a cause for either of those things. But
Yeah.
you know, I'm sure genes do have a huge component, but I can imagine there being plenty of kids who have the gay gene that don't end up being gay because genes don't work in like a one-directional thing. You know, there's epigenetic changes that occur over the course of your life, and yeah, I think I actually know the
Forrest
video.
Talk about it plenty.
I think I actually know the video you're talking about, Robin, and I think it popped up on our recommended recently, and I think it's interesting that people were saying it invalidates non-binary people because I've seen all of the data on the physiological alleged, you know, brain states that could be considered a cause of trans identity. And the thing that people mistake about those papers is that when we're looking at the regions that are associated with having differences correlated with sex, there is a box that is the highest collection of, you know, the averages. And then usually there's a line that's like this. And there's two little, that's the range. And without fail, always there is overlap in the range of all those regions. And so, well, sure, there's strong, sexually dimorphic correlations with the averages. It's not impossible to have a cisgender man have a female brain in that regard. And for precisely that reason, I think those same papers confirm non-binary people in the exact same way that they could allegedly confirm trans people. Just for the fact that, there's such significant overlap in these sexually dimorphic regions of the brain, then it's not at all inconceivable that a significant portion of the population would exist within that overlap and be like, I don't really feel like I align with either sex particularly strongly or gender, whatever. I don't think there's a problem with investigating these things or finding it interesting. I do have a problem with people using the brain studies to confirm trans identities. Like, that's what makes us valid. Only because, what I was saying, it's completely conceivable, considering the overlap, that a cis man could have a female brain, or that a trans woman could have a male brain, for that matter. Does that mean we're going to be like, nope, you don't get medicine anymore, even though it's measurably and observably improved your life? We're going to forcibly detransition you. Like, what a ridiculous hypothetical that would put us in, right? So it's like, this is exactly what I was saying. Like, sure, it's interesting, and I'm totally on Hannah's side. Let's investigate more. More science is always good. More information is always better. I don't really think that people should get too excited about it being like a cause of gender, or afraid of it being like such a cause of gender that there's something to be concerned about. Like, it's really just an interesting correlation, and that's pretty much all we can say about it.
I also just think that, how do I put this? There are enough things for us to be concerned about today in terms of how trans people are treated, versus imagining this could hypothetically be used in the future for a gene thing. Yeah. They're already passing laws and stuff. Let's deal with that. We'll deal with sci-fi shit later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, we just talked a lot.
You're worried about the sci-fi stuff, and then also the this proves whether someone's trans or not thing that Arden was talking about.
Yeah, I get it. It's interesting, and to some extent, maybe it could be argued that that is a strong evidence that trans identities are valid, and that there is even a physiological impact on the brain. I don't think it's a strong argument to validate trans identities. I think it's much stronger to point out what we were saying earlier about how, we actually have really strong predictive models and diagnostic criteria for trans people that lead to them having significantly better outcomes in their life. And, whether or not they have a true female brain seems to me not worth anyone's time, or not worth investigating for yourself. I think it's better to just follow the advice of your medical team and what you feel is best for you. And if transition doesn't, work out for you, which it does, that is the case for a small portion of the people, then I think we need to have resources for those people to figure that out as well, and to be able to make sure that they're living happy, healthy lives. I don't think it's anything to be afraid of or to be upset about. I think it's just a thing that exists, and that is the only way that I view it.
Mm-hmm. I guess I was thinking about it as potentially being useful for when people who are ignorant on the topic say there's no such thing as a male brain or a female brain, it's just your body. Well, this is kind of evidence that the hardware of your brain can actually impact how you feel about yourself. That is something that we can demonstrate.
Certainly.
So it seems like it would be good evidence.
I think for certain people, evidence is great. I love evidence. I'm also a skeptic, and evidence is great. But I also think for the kind of people, there are a lot of people who are very transphobic, and science-based evidence is not going to convince them, because rhetorically it's not what they're looking for in the first place. I understand. I think data and evidence is important and the foundation of what you should, form your beliefs on. I just think a lot of people don't, unfortunately. So I don't know how much it would help practically for those people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, do you have anything else you wanted to tack onto that, Robin? Or
No, I just wanted to say real quick that thank you both for being very integral parts of my coming out to myself journey. Hannah, you especially. I remember I was a big fan of the Bible Reloaded before you came out, and that was one of the things that forced me to start introspecting, going like, why do I feel so weird about this? You know,
That's great.
where that ended up.
Thank you so much, Robin. I hope you have a wonderful day, and thanks for the topic. It was an interesting conversation.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Alrighty. We're just going to keep rolling. We've got a return caller up next. Well, I think so. Hopefully I'm not saddling this person with somebody else's history, but we've got Ricky, him in Florida. Ricky, you are live on the line. What do you got for us today?
Hey, Arden.
Hey.
Hi, Hannah. Big fan, by the way, Hannah. I will Reloaded and 12 Rules for Life. And even Jake's Takedown. Okay, so like my topic, and one thing that I've wondered about is if about are young people, maybe whether they be like in college or high school, even middle school, and let's say that they play around with gender identities, and where they go to be, non-binary or gender non-conforming, or even other identities, which is probably much rarer, but it's still a controversy, even whether there's a bunch of BS or truth in it. But what I mean by that is people identifying, I don't know, let's say as animals, or like fictional creatures, unicorns or Pokemon or whatever. But I'm kind of wondering if do you think that kids doing that might actually be ruining or hurting trans rights in any way? Or could that just be like a non-issue? Does that make sense, what I'm trying to ask?
It does make sense. I don't think they're affecting trans rights in any way. So no. I can give you a couple reasons why. The most obvious one is, are non-binary teenagers passing laws? No, the answer is no. No, non-binary teenagers aren't passing any laws. Meanwhile, the Republican Party is actively ruining the life of many trans people across many states. But it's kind of like, well, I'm wondering if it's kind of like the other way around, because it is Republican lawmakers ruining lives. Me calling from Florida, Ron DeSantis is definitely, and his administration is definitely ruining people's lives. And it kind of goes back to this entire culture war. Yes,
and I'm sure you've already gone.
I was just gonna say, I'm aware of why Republicans are pushing forward. They look for misinformation on trans people or try to frame completely benign things as problematic, and that's their motivation to save the children, as they often like to say, despite the fact that many children are suffering in many circumstances that they don't care about. But besides the point, no, I don't think non-binary kids are affecting trans rights in any any negative way at all. With regard to what you were saying, like, people who identify as an animal or Pokemon, we actually had a conversation last week with a mom whose kid identifies as a cat. And what we came to the conclusion of is that when her kid says that she identifies as a cat, she actually means something fundamentally different to what trans people are meaning when they say, I identify as gender X, Y, or Z. And if these kids want to meow at people and it helps them communicate better with their families, I really don't care at the end of the day. And in many cases, I think it could be a way for a young, confused kid to explore gender without necessarily having to broach that specific topic. No, I don't think kids who are playing with gender are doing anything materially to harm the trans people. Republicans are repeatedly doing many things to materially harm and ruin the lives of trans people. Hannah, do you want to jump in on that?
I think you pretty much said it. I think it's a case where Ricky is listening to Republicans be like, we don't care about adults, we care about these things, and believing them. That's not true. That's a rhetorical trick. They're using children because they know that if they actually said what they really believe, which is we just don't like trans people and don't want them to openly live lives, most people would be like, what the fuck? And this was briefly mentioned earlier. I think you even said, like, most people just don't give a shit. I think in America that's true.
Yeah.
I don't think most people in the United States are very pro or anti. I think most are just like, most people just want to not give a shit. They want to disengage from reality and politics and do their own personal shit, which isn't healthy either. But regardless, most just don't give a shit. They get tricked by Republican rhetoric about, like, we just care about the children. They don't. They don't give a shit about children.
Andrew, and you're definitely going off on their, think of the children. We care about the children, just kind of rhetoric. But the problem with the rhetoric is that it just kind of seeps, even to people who would not really be open to it, but they hear it from, like, I don't know, social circle, friends, associates, friends of friends. Because and Arden brought up the mom that called that whose kid wants to identify as a cat, and I'm lumping that in. I know it's not the same as gender, but besides like that, besides that rhetoric, there's also kids that whenever throughout my experience, when the topic of, let's say, about trans people, trans rights is brought up, it goes right back to that concern of kids. We already know with cats, which is the completely made up nonsense thing about schools needing litter boxes, but it's also complaints about people have 52 genders right now. Or the neo pronouns, like the they zer pronoun, and it's
like
it's not even anymore.
It feels like
about,
you're
like,
saying I feel cringe about these things, so people should stop. It's all you're saying. You're basically saying I think kids are being cringe, so I'm going to blame them for adults attacking them and other trans people. You're allowed to be uncomfortable with kids doing cringy things if you think they're cringe. They're kids. Have you met kids? They're weird. It's fine. Using that to be like, they should knock it off, because if they don't, Republicans are going to do more bad things. It's not kids' fault they're cringe. They're kids. It's fine. You're an adult. Be able to, like, think about the world in a way that is nuanced. You're
Also,
blaming children.
Sorry.
Oh my god. Sorry.
No, it's okay. So I'm sorry for butting in. I was just going to say, Ricky, you mentioned that, some of this rhetoric appeals to some people, and while sure, it does capture some people, I'm pretty sure most polls, when you actually look at it, think, even from Republicans, think that there's way too much time and energy spent on people attacking trans people and laws attacking trans people. I'm pretty sure all the polls, maybe I'm wrong, last time I saw, there was a collection of polls that were suggesting that even Republicans were indicating that there's way too much focus and way too many laws legislating the lives of trans people. Whether or not they think trans people are real and valid and deserve, like, equal rights, they just don't. They think it's too much. Specifically with regard to, like, people go to, well, what about the kids a lot, right? Listen, if you're talking about just debating people you interact with randomly, I agree that's really frustrating. But at the end of the day, I don't care if some dude down the road thinks that trans kids don't deserve healthcare and that I'm a man. I genuinely don't care, because the medical community supports my position on this. Most states aren't taking a regressive anti-trans position on this. I think most people, the minds of society has already been made up on this issue, and the science agrees with me that trans people deserve access to medication. We deserve access to changing our documents. Am I frustrated all the time hearing the same repeated rhetoric? Abso-fucking-lutely. It is exhausting when it gets repeatedly swatted down and then brought up, but I don't think it's as much of a concern as you think. I don't think non-binary kids are having a meaningful impact on the voters at all. I think the affordability of housing, the access to healthcare, living in food deserts, those are the things that most voters actually care about. Do the psychotic Trumpers, who are actually making up an even less portion of the Republican voter base now, really
Thank God
interesting
for
thing
that.
came. What?
Thank God for that.
Yeah, there was actually really on the exit polls in New Hampshire, Nikki Haley had 43% of the vote, and 70% of her voters said that they would not vote for Trump in the general election. I don't know who they'd vote for, and maybe they would.
New
when,
Hampshire
you know,
has open primaries, just for the record. They weren't all Republicans. It still did. There were still Republican. I just want to make sure.
Sure.
There were independents in that poll.
It was like 70% of her voters specifically said that they would not do that. I don't think that's necessarily indicative of that, like Trump couldn't win or anything like that. My point is just saying that I think the jingoistic, MAGA crazed people will, yes, jump right on whatever it is that Trump says they should care about. And sometimes that's hating trans people. And do we need to be like alert and making sure that, you know, in a lot of places we need to care about our own rhetoric and how we're presenting ourselves in terms of activism? Absolutely. But middle school age non-binary kids aren't activists, and we shouldn't force them into that role that they have to conform to things for our rhetorical strategy because they're fucking children, and what they do with their gender is not my business. I don't think it has anything to do with the attacks on trans people. I think it is a convenient rhetorical device that Republicans use to point to them. I don't think it's actually having an impact in reality. Anything else you wanted to add on to that, Ricky?
No, not not really. So what you're saying is that the poisonous rhetoric, it's just going to exist anyway, and it's just an exhausting thing to really that you just have to confront each time individually, regardless.
Yeah, I mean, Republicans are still talking, you know, still call like women who get abortions harlots, right? Like they still say that like gay people are living a depraved lifestyle. Like this stuff isn't going to go away. Even if we cement trans access to healthcare in like federal law, you know, I don't think that's a realistic future anytime soon, at least. But if that happened tomorrow, I don't think they would give up this game. They'd be like, it's done. We're just going to turn it in and go home. We lost this one, boys. No, they're going to sit here and hammer on this stuff. It's frustrating for sure. And I understand why even some trans people fall for this notion that non-binary people are somehow like ruining trans rights. But again, it's not the fault of queer youth that they are turned into a political device. It's not their fault at all. And I don't think we should blame them for that.
Okay. And I guess let me ask you when I'm actually up against that as someone, because it's happened repeatedly that once again trans rights, they broach the subject of trans rights and it goes to to cringy kids. And I mean, how would you be if that was something that was kept on repeating in your life, in your social life?
I would probably be like, why, like, kid, did you, I would probably say basically what I said to you, but like less dickishly. I'd be like, do you think kids exploring their identity is like a new thing? Like, what is it? What is it? Like, I point out the absurdity of it. I would point out, like, why are you concerned about this hypothetical thing? Like, and like, you even brought up the litter box thing. Like, in the absence of kids doing things that these people don't understand, they will make things up. So it doesn't matter. Yes, you just have to confront it every time and point out how absurd it is and make them think about what they're doing. What are you doing? I wouldn't tell them. I'd ask them, like, why do you care about this? What do you mean? Like, did you not explore your identity as a kid? Did you not know kids who did something that maybe didn't turn out to be their identity, but they were exploring that? Or like things that maybe, when you were a teenager that you look back on? Also, the shitting on non-binary people frustrates me because it reminds me of like the kind of like, and I know this was already touched on, but the kind of like LGBT people who are like, all the loud gays should shut up and then they'll stop attacking us. Like, no, that's not how it works. That's not how it works at all. If that was how it worked, there wouldn't have been issues with LGBT rights at all in the first place, would there? It's not that we're obnoxious, it's just that people, some of them don't like us for stupid reasons. Like, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, if you're hoping, Ricky, that, you could make this appeal and that these people are going to stop bringing this up, that's a bad expectation on your part. The people who care deeply about the identities of teenagers are already like detached from reality. And I'm always an advocate of conversing with these people, doing your best to reach them. If they're not changing their mind, that's not because they have a point or because all of a sudden, like, maybe the non-binary kids really are a problem. It's because they are like ideologically wed to the notion that trans people and queer people are depraved and bad and, destroying Western civilization or some sort of analogous belief in there. And that what are the solutions to that going forward, right? Like, eliminate us, deny us.
An analogous belief also being that it's part of some communist agenda to make everyone do Orwellian doublethink and doublespeak.
Well, sure, but then I would say, okay,
you're not gonna.
I would say prove that. Okay, you think it's an Orwellian communist plot? Prove it. Where? Where do you see evidence of that? And if they say, well, exactly. Somebody asked me to call them they, them, be like, is one non-binary person at Walgreens going to institute communism in the U.S.? I have a feeling not. And to that fact, I think, despite where I might align politically, very, very left-leaning, there's no real support for like socialism or communism in the US right now. It's not a realistic fear. Even if like Bernie got power, we might have some socialist laws that would get passed, but it's not like we would turn into a socialist country overnight. Like we are so far from that. It's just a completely unrealistic thing. But
I love your spiel, but I already knew that one was complete nonsense. But it's almost like shocking the first time to hear it. It's all like, how do I even respond to that? But all right, let me wrap us up. Thank you, Arden, and thank you, Hannah. I'm excited to finally to actually be able to speak to you. And and a request just for you, Hannah, that you've done hilarious things about Andrew Tate. Well, Andrew Tate's How to Get Girls or PhD program. And your take, if you want. Anyway,
thanks,
bye,
Ricky.
guys.
Talk to you later.
It was awesome.
Thanks.
I appreciate that. Ricky's called in a lot, and I've gone off and snapped on Ricky a couple of times because sometimes he calls back with like a very, very similar thing of like, well, what if the Republicans are all right about everything they've ever said? And I'm like, use your brain, child. Use your brain. But yeah, that was relatively productive conversation. So let me make sure this next caller
That's what I'm looking for. Relative productivity.
To be honest, sometimes I'll take it. All right, let's take Daniel.
It's better than my...
Or go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, on my show, I like I said, I deal with flat earthers who, no matter what you do, don't listen. So this is like great relative. Like, this is great.
Right. Yeah. All right, let's take Daniel. Pronouns are he, him in Utah. Daniel, you are live on the line. What is going on?
Howdy. Sorry, this is my first time calling. I've watched your gals' shows, and I think gals are doing great stuff.
Hey, before we start in, I just want to tell you, you don't have to correct guys to gals. Guys just means everyone most of the time in English, in American English. So I'm not offended by you guys. Some people might be, but I just want to let you know, you don't have to like self-correct for fear of like hurting our feelings or whatever. Just go ahead and tell us what you think.
All right. Well, as you know, in Utah, there's a lot of conservatives around here, and I have a couple of conservative friends. And I had a debate with one of them, and well, they thought that the LGBTQ community is pushing their rhetoric towards everyone, and I basically gave counterpoints but all my counterpoints lied with basically science and stuff that I knew in general. But the thing that I lacked often was the actual trans experience. I didn't know how to speak on the behalf of trans people. So I'm just trying to find any resources or anything that I can be more informed and basically said, okay, this is how they feel, or this is how how I can approach that subject.
I think, maybe there's a mistake in thinking that you need to be some sort of representative of the trans community in the conversation. I think that that's not necessary. I think you can easily talk to these people and address their arguments without feeling like you have to be a representative or like you have to appeal to the trans experience necessarily. If you want to be able to do that, I think there are resources and ways you can go about that, but it's probably not going to be quite as like empirically rooted. I think really the like art created by trans people is a good way to go about that. Like I'm a big fan of memoir as like a genre, and there are some great memoir out there by trans people, and that I think can be really informative of what the trans experience is like. One of my favorite of those authors wrote a phenomenal show that's been, I think, is it on Fox maybe, called Pose. Janet Mock, she's a great writer and author. There's definitely ways you can connect to the trans experience specifically. But I don't know that that's the route I would take if I were in your position. Hannah, you want to say something?
I was just going to say, like, rhetorically, when I'm thinking about if I had to have a discussion like this, like, let's say they didn't, know I was trans or something, or if I was just chatting with someone and they had no idea who I was and it was this, I would probably focus less on, like, when dealing with, like, Republicans, anti-trans Republicans, I don't think you're going to find a ton of helpful stuff in trying to relate, like, my experience necessarily, as much as maybe trying to get them to understand it through the lens of things they do care about. Like, what if the federal government told you what you could do with your body? You know what I mean? Like, what if the federal government can tell, trans people they can't take certain things, or if the state government can, what medicine are you taking that they're going to tell you can't take? I'm not saying these points specifically are the best. I'm just saying sometimes the kind of, and again, I'm broadly generalizing. This is going to depend on your audience. It always does. But a lot of people who are conservative don't seem to have a ton of empathy for other people. That's a broad generalization, but it's what I see. So it helps if you relate it to them and kind of use their fear of slippery slope stuff against them. Like, if the government comes in and starts telling people what they can do with their bodies and stuff, what is that going to do for you? Again, that's not my favorite way to do it because it's not fun, and I'd like if people recognized my, agency and rights as a human being, but a lot of them don't give a shit, so sometimes that helps.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I think I heard, I might get roasted for appealing to this person right now, and maybe deservedly so, but I think I've heard Destiny make a really good argument once. He doesn't make his trans takes are hit and miss, but one argument I think was really strong from him was talking about ADHD meds and how there's a lot of controversial data on ADHD meds and, risk of like addiction and how it might impact, outcomes, and that there's definitely a risk reward analysis that goes on, especially when giving it to young kids. But like, if somebody told him he was making this argument, I think I might be mischaracterizing it, but I think generally the idea was like, if somebody came in and said, well, the data isn't conclusive on the benefits of ADHD medication, therefore we're going to ban ADHD medication all across the board. So how many people would be in a complete uproar, right? Just because the medicine isn't proved beyond the shadow of a doubt to benefit every single person exactly the same. It's pretty effective, by the way. Most of the medications are very strong and are not nearly as addictive as, non-medical amphetamines. But the point is, I think it's a really strong argument, and kind of in tandem to what Hannah was saying, that, I think appealing to their own rights. Nominal Naomi, who's been on the show, is also, I know her approach is often, because I'm a freedom-loving American. That's why I think people should be allowed to, wear the clothes they want and take the medicine that their doctor agrees is best for them and those sorts of things. But, how does that all land with you, Daniel, so far?
Actually, I'm actually really glad that you said that, because I did something very similar with my wow, words are hard. I did exactly that, and I wasn't 100% sure how I felt about it, because yet again, I wasn't sure about my own experiences versus the trans experience. I wasn't sure if it was okay, but I feel a lot better that seeing that you two are okay with it.
Yeah, I think kind of, piggybacking off the last caller, I think sometimes when we're in this debate, especially people who aren't maybe directly impacted by the outcomes of the debates, there can be this frustration when I make this argument and the person doesn't accept it, just doesn't accept facts, or they just say that, the fact that I'm appealing to science, well, I don't accept the science you're appealing to, or something ridiculous like that. I understand the frustration of being well, I must have failed in the argument somehow. But in most cases, I really don't think that's what's going on. I think these people are, like we were saying, really ideologically wed to this notion that queer people are depraved and awful and disgusting. And no amount of facts or empathy outside of, I think occasionally having your kid come out as trans can sometimes be really reforming for some people. Definitely not all. But yeah, I think in most of those cases, people, it's not your fault that they don't accept facts and evidence. It's frustrating as hell, but, like Hannah's saying, she argues with flat earth, or she, reviews flat earth stuff all the time. Those people aren't wow, you know what, that the evidence you provided is really impactful. And I didn't consider the fact that every, physics and science geological organizations probably disagrees with my position on it. No, they say they're all bought and paid for. Academia is woke. They have all, it's like dealing with theists where there is always an out built into their argument. So you can never pin them down on their actual beliefs. And it's frustrating as hell, but it's not a fault of you in the argument. It's just humans have a really hard time accepting when we're wrong about things, because if you're wrong and you are in the out group, that can, in our evolutionary history, that could have been detrimental to us. And so we kind of have some built-in protective mechanisms against thinking that we're wrong and being, ousted from the in-group that we think we're a part of. But I'm glad that was helpful to some extent for you. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that, Daniel, before we let you go?
Yeah. This is a bit off topic, but I was discussing with my girlfriend about this stuff, and she brought up a topic that she brought up a scientific finding about rats basically turning, basically after all the basic needs were met, they slowly started becoming more homosexual, and I don't fully understand the science behind it, and I'm like, what does that mean? And
was she referring to the rat utopia experiment? Because I'm familiar, vaguely.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what it was at all. I thought it was something that was made up. And I was like,
I'm so invested.
It's a psych experiment that was done decades ago, and they basically gave, a whole community of mice everything they could possibly want, ample food and everything. And basically mice society collapsed. They all stopped doing stuff and started eating each other and fucking each other. You get it. A lot of people who are more right-wing will look at this and go oh my god, look! Degeneracy! Society is this. We are these mice. This is society. Fall of Rome, etc., etc. You know the rhetoric. In reality, the study, I'd have to go look it up again. There were a lot of problems with it, and it didn't... The conclusions drawn by many people are not sound based on the actual experiment itself. Reminds me a little bit of the guy who was trying to teach dolphins to talk. It's interesting as an experiment, but it's badly constructed. It makes a more interesting drama YouTube video than it does any sort of actual scientific inquiry.
I think without having seen the study, that is something I experience with animal studies a lot, is people trying to come to conclusions about their psychiatric state or the implications of that for other animals that I think are really difficult to find, like the hope experiment of drowning mice. oh, they had hope, and that's why after getting saved, they were able to swim so much longer. And it's like, I think rats are really smart. They probably learned that somebody might save them, but I think it's pretty much a stretch to call that hope. And similarly, yeah, coming to conclusions about like everyone's turning gay when their needs are met. I think that is I think the reality is that the animal kingdom, generally speaking, is fucking horny, and that animals just like to fuck. Like,
the hidden top of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs is no longer like self, God, what is it? Like self, whatever. It's just gay. It's just gay sex. Yeah. Self-actualization. Fuck that. Gay sex. Sloppy.
I mean, something I find interesting is like when you look at groups of other great apes, how much sex and gay sex there is. Like I'm pretty sure it's bonobos that are known to trade objects for like oral sex with each other all the time, and often of the same sex. Like they're just out there putting their mouths on anything for a couple of free berries. I think like I do think humans, we've constructed this fake notion of like these really solidified sexual categories that we get put in. Like I'm gay and I'm straight, and like that's like impermeable. And I think the reality is that probably over time, humans will kind of like consider different things sexually and romantically speaking. And they're probably are relatively stable, but yeah, I don't know. It just sounds to me like animals like fucking, and I don't know what else you can really draw from that.
Yeah, I was telling her exactly something around the lines of, but we're not rats.
Yeah.
We're human beings.
Yeah. I think it's interesting.
Also, rats do homosexual behavior outside of the experiment. I want to point that out. My wife has worked with mice. She's like a PhD. Like, mice will have gay sex. They're animals. Animals have gay sex all the time. They don't know what they're not thinking to themselves, I'm going to get something pregnant. They're just like, they're not even thinking. They just, this is the thing I'm doing. They're instinctually doing it. And mice are smart. I'm maybe underplaying their sense of existence, but they just fuck things.
It's true. I breed rodents because I have a sizable snake collection, and yeah, they like sex. Let me tell you, it is not hard to become a rodent breeder. They make babies really fast and very often on their own. It is fascinating. Anyway, this conversation has devolved. Now, this might be actual degeneracy, so I think we're gonna move on and let you go, Daniel. Thank you so much for calling. Appreciate the topic.
No, thank you for having me.
Yeah, have a nice day.
Yeah.
Alrighty, we have 2 callers left to get to. I would like to get to them both, and then we'll move on to Super Chat. So if you are listening to me on the line right now, we are heading your way. We're going to take you in the order you came. So just a reminder that we do read Super Chats at the end of the show for $5 or more. Patreon.com/calltheline, linemerch.com. There's lots of ways you can support us and get a little extra for yourself. So check all those things out. But until then, we are talking to Henry. Pronouns are he, him in Canada. Henry, you are live on Transatlantic. What's going on?
Hi, how are you?
Doing well. What's up?
I just wanted to know, because I'm not a trans person, but how can I learn more about trans people?
Man, we got a theme to today's show. I mean, we have recommended a few ways, and I can reiterate them here right now, but it depends on exactly what you're looking for, learning more about trans people. Are you looking for like empirical studies that validate transition and trans healthcare, or are you looking to like understand like what a trans person goes through in their life?
I'm looking more for the second thing, to understand what the main issues are for trans people and how I can be a better ally.
Yeah, there are. I don't know if you're a reader. There's a lot of great books that I can recommend. Anything by Julia Serrano, anything by Janet Mock. I think A Queer and Pleasant Danger by Kate Bornstein is really good. I forget the title of the book by, I think, is it Sean Fay or something like that? Hopefully I didn't pronounce her name wrong. There's so many like autobiographies and memoir, and like even there's a really good fictional one about a detransition baby, which, detransitioners are a really hot topic, and this is an excellent, very pro-trans fictional book about a particular person who detransitions and what that experience was like for them, and how, you know, that didn't mean that they were suddenly just like feeling like a normal cis person, and how like there were still a lot of queer gender experiences wrapped up in all of that. And yeah, I think I mean, that's kind of the direction I would go for that sort of thing. That's where I went when I was like, but how do I know that I'm trans? I need to really understand trans people, like pre-transition. That's what I did. I read a fuck ton of books about it, and I thought it was a good approach for me. I felt like I was like, oh yes, I this is definitely me. I am seeing myself in every single one of these stories. Yeah, there are so many different stories you can go to, and there are great shows like Pose, written by the author of one of the books that I mentioned, and there are a few other good shows, but not that really like dive into the specific trans experience. It's more like there's just an incidental trans person, or it's a story written by a cis person and a cis actor plays a trans person, and it's kind of terrible representation. And there's a good handful of those as well. But Hannah, do you have any thoughts on this one?
Oh gosh, I wish I was more well read on the topic. I haven't read a ton of like experience of other like trans women or trans people in general in books, just because I lived it. And anytime I saw a book about it, I was like, I'm exhausted already. So your suggestions, I assume, are great.
Yeah. Also, Stephanie Helms in chat just recommended She's Not There by Jennifer Finney Boylan. That's also another great memoir that I would highly recommend. I like hers in particular because she had an experience where she transitioned late into a cis hetero marriage where they had several kids. And so you kind of got to see how like, and they're all still a good family and very happy together. And you got to see kind of how transition did make things difficult and it did change their relationship a lot, but how they navigated that like effectively. And, you know, it just doesn't apply to everyone, but those are just some of the recommendations that I think of when somebody asks me a question like that.
Is it possible to post them somewhere in the chat or in the, like below?
I think there are a few people sharing their recommendations in chat. I can do my best to put a couple of them in chat. Although I am producing and hosting right now, so my free time to type things out is not really there. Yeah, if you just check chat, I'm sure a bunch of people dump your favorite recommendations on trans experience, stories, media, movies, books, whatever you can think of. And now you should have a huge list.
I just want to say, Arden, I love you. I think you're wonderful.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Henry. I do my best out here.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for taking my call.
Yeah, thank you for calling. I hope you find some good recommendations in the chat. See you later, Henry.
Thank you.
All righty, we've got one caller left on the line. Let's just bring them right in so we can wrap up the show. We've got Pyro. Pronouns are they, them in California. Pyro, you are live on Transatlantic. What's going on?
Hi. It is so nice to get to talk to you guys. Hannah, I've been following you for a while. I love your channel. Well, yeah, you guys are great.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the compliments. What did you want to talk about, Pyro?
Okay, so I've been having this kind of back and forth with my mom. I recently identify as like trans non-binary. And it's been really difficult trying to explain that to her. She's very religious, evangelical Christian, and she seems to think that I think it's there's a fallacy. I think it's like the slippery slope where, okay, if a biological man can call himself a woman, then why can't a white man say he's black? Why is that bad if it's the same thing? Like, it's not the same thing. But I also don't really know how to explain the differences, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So I've tried a few things. Also, it wouldn't necessarily be a slippery slope, but I think it'd be a false equivalency. It would be what the fallacy there. But specifically with transracialism, I think it's important to note that race is like an external thing and it's heritable. Whereas when we're talking about gender identity, we're talking about an internal sense of self that is not heritable. So there's really no comparison to race at all. And there's no evidence that anyone has actually ever been really transracial and benefited from transracial like transition. You can point to Rachel Dolezal or something, but like anecdote does not equal data, and plural of anecdote does not equal data. Now, if in some hypothetical future there is evidence for transracialism and that it benefits people's lives and that we all can agree to be respectful of those people, I don't really care what other people want to do with their lives. That being said, yeah, there is, in my view, no real comparison between what trans people are advocating for and what transracial people are advocating for. None the least of which is, people in our chat like to mention this all the time, transracialism is like ironic in its naming because it's something that white people have adopted to discredit trans people, but transracialism is a term that already exists to describe the experience of people of color who are adopted into white families and white communities and what that experience is like. Yeah, it is, it sounds like you've got a hot mess, and yeah, Hannah, do you have thoughts on that?
That's tough. I've heard that one before. I think you covered it. It's one of those things where you know the answer because of all the things that you have seen and read and watched and experienced, but when you actually have to articulate it to someone who has like no experience with any of these things and really considering their own identity in a way that trans people have, it's hard to articulate in a brief, snappy way. But I think you did a good job, all things considered. Like, I think that's pretty much it. That's where it is, you know?
Well, we get that call about transracialism quite often, actually. In particular, like 4 times in the last couple months, I think it's come up. So I've had the opportunity to refine and think, what did I do wrong about this one? And and I think the external heritable distinction is important in what we're talking about there. But yeah, as far as like, appealing to your evangelical mom, I will say this is not to, I don't want to steal what hope you may have left, but I'll say my mom is I won't say very progressive. I don't really know if she has much in the way of politics. I think she doesn't really care for politics, to be honest, and she kind of tries to detach from it. She's very accepting of me and my non-binary sibling. However, it's very, very easy for her to call me she, her, and call me her daughter. It's been very difficult for her to talk about my non-binary sibling using the correct pronouns or anything. I think in some ways being binary trans, obviously gets you some privileges in that you aren't trying to teach them anything new about gender. You are just saying, you've put me in this mental box, move me to this one. Whereas when you're approaching especially an evangelical person with, I want you to reframe your entire concept of gender from the ground up, that is a whole different ballgame that you're proposing to that person. And while I absolutely think you have every right to be upset and hurt when you get misgendered and to advocate for yourself that she do better and try harder, I do think there's an element of like, you've known, you've had your whole life to sort of experience things and sort out where you land. She is just becoming aware of this, and you are just starting to ask her to start this process of reframing her worldview. And I think it's fair if it takes a decent amount of time for that process to like really happen and flourish. It sucks, and it's the nature of being a marginalized person that we often have to consider that our well-being comes like almost second in some ways to society's growth, and that sucks, and you have every right to be mad about it and to push society in a better direction. But I think there's also an element of being like patient and understanding with like, Mom, fucking please. I know it's hard, but like, can we get there together? Please. I love you and I want to have a relationship with you, but this is like hurtful to me, and I really need you to like put a sincere effort into having a relationship with me and not the person you want me to be. Is that helpful, or do you feel like we're totally like kind of rambled off the mark or something?
No, you make a lot of sense. Um, I know it's a new thing for her, so I understand like she's struggling, and we have had several conversations where she's like, I'm just sorry that you're struggling like that, but then it's just I feel like her everyday choices are don't reflect any of that like compassion,
Yeah.
and so it's kind of hard to deal with that way. But also like the way I've tried to explain it, at least about being non-binary, is that I hear what you're saying about the being transracial. I don't think it's really a thing. Um, like how like I as I imagine it, it's like sex is like more biological, right? It is bimodal, but it's biological and things like that. So you have like sexual characteristics of your body that people can point out to help identify what sex you are. Whereas gender is like how you present on the outside to other people. So like when you see someone walking down the street, you don't know what's in their pants, but you assume they're a man or woman depending on how they present themselves based on your like where you're from and things like that. So it's like if um like a my friend who's half black, like she doesn't really fit into either cultures really. She has like a mix of things, and that kind of confused her. So I was like, maybe I'm not saying that in the right way. I know I've talked about this before with I think Forrest and Matt. Excuse me, sorry. And it's I know it's like how race is different than like ethnicity. I think is what they said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, ethnicity has to do with like your genetic heritage, whereas race is more of like a socially constructed assumption based on your external characteristics, right? Like people, it was really common in America to say African American when referring to black people, but I know there's been a kind of a push to move away from that because not all black people in America have heritage that brings them back to Africa, and so it's kind of like inaccurate in that way. That's kind of a meaningful way to help the distinction between ethnicity and race, but yeah, I think even that is like, I would try not to get down the weeds too much if you can help it. And, unless your mom is like bringing it up a lot on the transracial issue, I think it's better to just appeal to continually, your interest in having a relationship with your mom. And I absolutely hear what you're saying when you're saying that, she says, oh, I'm sorry you're suffering, but then her actions and words don't reflect that maybe outside of those conversations. It is a difficult thing dealing with parents and transition and trying to find acceptance. And I think maybe one of the things that could be good for you is to try to lay down some boundaries with your mom and be like, hey, I love you. I want to maintain this relationship with you, but I also don't really feel respected or seen by you in your words and actions, especially regarding my gender identity. And so I would like for us to, whatever those boundaries are that you want to set, like maybe avoid talking about gender to what extent you can help it. Obviously, she's going to have to use pronouns to refer to you, so it's going to come up. But I think you can try to discuss and maybe agree upon boundaries that you can navigate. And, don't expect that the boundaries are going to work perfectly the first few times. I think if it's new, I think you have to be like, just remind her that like, hey, mom, I realize it's new. It's okay if we, make mistakes or whatever, but we did agree to try to avoid this so that we can maintain our relationship, and that's important to me. I think kind of reiterating those things can be really helpful. Yeah, I don't know how much more else I have for this situation because it's one of those difficult things where experiences like this are so personal. Sorry, go on.
Oh, I was just saying, yeah, that like it's really difficult. Just because currently I live with her, so like my mental health really struggles too, because like I don't know, like she says it's the very much the hate the sin, love the sinner kind of thing. And I have a hard time not taking that personally, because like but I am non-binary, so like you saying that you don't like that part, but that is me. And then she gets really like disgusted that I'm taking testosterone, and she doesn't understand why, and she's like, oh, you're just trying to be a man, and I'm like, no. I don't know how to explain. Like, I'm not a man or a woman. I'm like in between. So, but like, that's like I'm barely understanding too. So it makes it difficult to explain to her. But I think I will do what you said though, and just keep appealing more to her love for me and her compassion, because I think she is trying, but also like religious doctrine is a bitch. So like it's gonna be hard to get through, but I think in the long run, especially once I do move out, I think it won't be as tumultuous for both of us. But
I
yeah,
want to give Hannah,
thank
I do
you
have
for
last thoughts with regard to that, but if Hannah, did you have anything you wanted to say to any of that?
I was just going to say, I think lean into the fact that she loves you, and I don't know. Even I would make sure you expressed to her that even if she doesn't understand, like, you're her child, and like calling who you are a sin is really hurtful. I'd just be open about that when she's being hurtful. I'd say that hurts me. That hurts me a lot.
Yeah.
Because if she really does love and care about you, that should matter. That should matter. Your feelings matter.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
she should care. So I hope, I don't know. I just hope you know that who you are is not a sin. Like, I know you know that, but sometimes it's just good to hear. Sometimes people need to hear it even though they know it. Who you are isn't a sin.
Yeah.
You're good. You're you.
Yeah,
and that's great.
Yeah, the only other thing I wanted to add on to that before we let you go, Pyro, is, well, I definitely think, like we were saying, definitely appeal to, her love for you and stuff. Also, don't fall too deep down the trap of like thinking that you have to get her approval or her love to be okay, because I'll tell you, I don't have a great relationship with my dad. We don't really talk much. It's gotten better over the years, but we don't, because I had to eventually make a decision of endlessly trying to get his love and acceptance was more damaging for me than accepting the fact that he is who he is and he is unwilling to change. And I almost have to then accept him for who he is and decide if I want a relationship with him. And the answer is a little bit, but not really like a normal father-daughter relationship. And so I don't know. I think you definitely got to only keep doing this thing, appealing to her feelings and all of that, if you feel like it's something you want to and are able to do. Like, don't hurt yourself to get her love and acceptance. Hannah, you want to go in again?
Real quick, sorry. Someone in the chat said, I think the hosts severely overestimate a lot of American parents. I want to bring that up. I don't have a relationship with my parents and haven't for years. So I know what it's like. I know. But I wanted to say, I think it's fair for people you care about to try and give a benefit of the doubt, at least initially. And, I'm not saying that's going to work. I'm not here to give you a fairy tale where everyone's going to accept you no matter what. All you got to do is give them patience. That's not life. I know that. I've experienced that. But, that doesn't mean you don't give people space to grow. If you never give people the opportunity, then they never will get a chance to surprise you. I'm not saying you always will be, but just when you can, give people that space. When you can't, don't. And get away for your own well-being. But when you can, I think it's fair to do so. That's all I'm saying. Okay.
Well, I think that is the perfect note to end on. So, Pyro, unless there's anything else you wanted to add in, we're probably going to have to let you go so we can wrap up the show. But thank you for calling in. And I do wish you the best of luck. I empathize deeply with how frustrating your situation is.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you guys taking my call. I'll definitely, I do think I will keep, like, for now, just keep working with my mom on it. I already lost my dad. Like, I cut him off a very long time ago. He's a lot more abusive than she is. So I guess maybe I'm less scared of, like, losing both my parents. So, but for now, I'm okay with having to struggle a little bit, because I do, like, love my family, and I guess I haven't reached my threshold yet of, like we're done here. So
I'm really glad you are
until
aware
that happens,
that you have
I
a
will.
threshold.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Pyro, and best of luck. We'll talk to you soon. All right,
Yeah.
call back if anything changes, and I would like to know how you're doing. So thanks, Pyro. We'll talk to you soon.
Will do. Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Yeah, I think being aware that you have a threshold and that it hasn't been met is really important for that conversation. Yeah, absolutely. I'm aware of how American parents can be shitty. A direct experience of that, and I spent a long time trying to appeal to my dad and get him to love and accept me and treat me the way I wanted to, and it didn't work. And I've made peace with that. I am very much okay with that's just how my life is going forward, and I have lots of great loving people in my life who I'm very full of support and happiness in my life. But yeah, I think I agree with what Hannah was saying. It's always worth a shot to try, and that was a big thing for me. I wanted desperately to be like, I want to know that if eventually I have to give up on this, I can say that I tried. I went half the way and more than half the way on countless occasions, and he didn't meet me, and that's not on me. I think that's what most trans people end up probably doing and feeling. But that has been the end of the caller portion of the show. So we're going to go move on to super chats. Any super chats of $5 or more, we will read them out live right here on air for y'all to see. Let's see. Let me get this window up. Oops.
By the way, all your transitions have been very smooth this stream. All the everything. So good job.
Thank you. Except for this is not the right super chat. I had the wrong setting. There we go. But
you should have pretended it was. It would have seemed smooth.
Yeah, right. No, I always send a test super chat in, and for some reason something changed. So, $5 or £5 from some loser nobody, never heard of her, Katy Montgomerie. Hannah, do you like mayonnaise? XOR, should we invite you back?
What's the correct answer here, by the way? I'll be give an honest answer either way, but I'm curious. Like, what's Katy's stance on mayonnaise? I missed this.
Katy is this the most anti-mayonnaise person you will ever meet in your entire life.
Okay. Has Katy read the article that Boomer did that one time about how mad they were about millennials not liking mayonnaise? Because, boy, that's an article to read. Okay, mayonnaise. Not a fan. On a burger from time to time, but very rarely. Mayonnaise is the...
I like mayo. Because I'm not anti-mayo, I've been cast into our chat as the pro-mayo person, and I'm like, it's so weird. I like mayo on my sandwiches. I also like it on a burger from time to time, especially if it's like garlic aioli. But
I think family reunions and like a different family gatherings of older generations ruin mayonnaise for me because like you said, on a sandwich or something, like it's fine. But then you go to like family gatherings growing up and there's just buckets of various vegetables or other things as coated in mayonnaise. It's just a bucket of mayonnaise and various other foods, and it makes me want to vomit. So
tuna and egg salads just soaked in mayonnaise. Yeah. I agree. There's definitely some ways mayonnaise can be gross. I don't have a hard stance the way Katy would like. Now we've got. Sorry. We alternate usually reading. Would you mind reading?
Oh, I can do that. I'm quite literate.
Okay.
A £5 super chat from Sean says, let n be a natural number, then n is n times parentheses n minus 1 times ... x. Multiplied by 2 by 1, it's pronounced n factorial. For all such n, That's it. I don't even know how to read math things.
Okay.
I don't know how to read math.
I've also
I'm
realized
a word person.
there has been a bug that we had last night that I'm realizing now is continued, where if the super chats are too long, they're getting cut off. So VMix updated recently, and it appears their update has made it where there's a character limit for super chats, which is really, really annoying because this has been an integral part of our show for over 3 years. But the rest of that,
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I have the chat open, so I was seeing if I could find it somewhere, but go ahead.
yeah, there's a fan funding tab on the chat. The rest of his chats, I think Sean uses he, him. For all such n, we have not n minus 1, not times not n equals not n. What? There's too many negatives there. The exclamation point is a negation, right? It's like the negation of the previous statement mathematically.
Don't ask me questions about this. I don't know.
I'm also not a math person, by the way, which is why Sean likes sending these super chats, because they all get a kick out of how what is the word where you are it's analogous to when you have a hard time reading. Oh, you just brought me a snake. Thank you.
Oh my god.
We breed snakes. We just made these. They're called dreamsicles. It has 2 recessive traits. This one an Inception? It looks like it, which means it also has a codominant trait called Orange Dream. So it's an Inception, Dreamsicle, Orange Dream. So pretty though. Look at that, the orange and the white.
Oh my god, cute. So pretty.
So cute. This is a girl. Yeah. Okay. She's gorgeous, and I can't wait to get her to the right home, or we might keep her because she's very valuable. Anyhoozle. Next super chat is $4.99 from 7 Lions. My wife knew I was trans way before I did, but she followed the prime directive. Didn't crack my egg. I couldn't ask for a more supportive partner. That's really cool. I like that.
Yeah.
Do you have the fan funding tab up?
I don't
It's
see
okay.
it. I only see top and live chat. I don't think I can see that unless I'm like a mod of the channel. So
Okay.
I can't see it.
Well, then
So
I
you can read them, or unless they're short enough, then.
Yeah. Okay. So
I'm color commentary. I'll spice things up. We're fine.
All right.
We talked about gay mouse orgies earlier, so
yeah,
we're good.
Also, I didn't bring it up because it wasn't relevant at the time, but when you're saying like when mice are all their needs are met, they just eat each other. Fucking true. I can't tell you. So we've bred cannibalism out of most of our mice and rats, but every now and then we will open a tub, and like 3 of them will be standing over a legion of corpses that they just massacred and ate, and they won't eat each other, the 3 that win, but like it's a weird dominance hierarchy thing, bizarre. Anyway, 20 pounds.
Sometimes you just gotta be a sigma mice and eat your enemies to assert dominance.
Right.
Oh yes.
20 pounds from Jackie Greenland. Came home Tuesday to find my new birth certificate finally arrived in the post. So yay, congrats, that's awesome. Of course, then realized I'd forgotten to send the forms for the marriage certificate to be changed. Dope. Hashtag Team Arden. I look forward to the day where we make all of these sorts of things virtual, because I also am in the process of changing a few things, and having to snail mail and like wait 6 to 8 weeks to know if they got it, and then have to wait 6 to 8 weeks for it to come back. And it's like, I feel like this process could be so much more efficient if it was like online. I can submit whatever, things you need to prove that I'm a citizen, or have doctors or whatever stupid hurdle you want to put up, and then just send it to me, like, or let me print it or something. Like, why are we doing it this way? Anyway. This one's short. I think that one's, yeah. All of that's on there.
$5 from Ben says, "Thank you for taking my call. Sorry, I was so nervous and stuttering a bit. Love you all. You're good. Oh my goodness. You can attest. You're above me right now. You before this stream, I was nervous. I was nervous. I told you that, and I've been doing this for 10 years. You're fine. Don't feel judged by anyone. Except me, I'm judging you harshly. But like generally, people are good."
Right. No, yeah, you did great, Ben. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
We've got here $10 from Kay Hewitt. Hannah, it seems like just yesterday I was listening to you eviscerate Jack Chick, and it got me through many projects as me and my friends laughed at your dark humor. Love ya.
That's great. For those who don't know, used to cover Chick Tracts, which are, I assume most of you know, evangelical little comics. They're pretty funny. I'm not upset Jack Chick passed away, but like the comic quality went way down. So
Right.
much less funny.
Yeah, that's great. This one's cut off. So we got $4.99 from Louise Richardson. There is something at our core that tells us what we are. We may not understand it for years, but it is there. I knew it for me as a young child. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's some evidence to suggest that like most kids have a pretty cemented awareness of their gender identity by age like 2 or something like that. Or at least are aware of like what other people are assuming their gender is and can like conform their behavior according to that. So for sure.
Yeah. I know like I'm not saying not every trans person has necessarily all these like memories of very specific things, but I from a young age remember multiple instances of like being very uncomfortable finding out like the difference between, boys and girls as they explain it, to kids, and being like, I don't like that even a little bit. Like I don't like that, and I'm not in the right category.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I don't know. It's just, it makes me roll my eyes, and you have to deal with the rhetoric that comes at you. You don't get to pick what other people say about you, but like it's eye rolling, and I know you feel this way too when you hear any like Republican or anti-trans person talk about like kids don't know their identity, they don't know what they're talking about, and you just think back to how upset and sure you were as a kid, and here you are as an adult, and you're like, yep, I was right.
Oh yeah, I have so many memories of like when I was the baby of the family for a long time. I have a very large extended family. That's what you do when you live in a rural area. You make babies. And all of my female cousins used to dress me up all the time. And I remember being like, this is amazing. And then we weren't allowed to, like, we had to sneak around her dad to go show our moms what we'd put together, and like couldn't be seen by the men of the family being so transgressive. And yeah, I have a lot of memories like that. And asking in one instance my cousin, I was like, next time we should get hair extensions so I can really look like a girl. And she was like, yeah, I guess. Like, oh no, I went too far. I'm sorry. Another one that is too long for this stupid update. That's so annoying. I want you guys to have your super chats get read properly. $5 from Monkey at a Typewriter. Is there an identity label for cis men who want to jump ship on the gender to avoid being associated with the activities of men writ large? I mean, if you want to jump ship, you can just kind of do that, Like, I don't know. I'm not your mom. This one's nice and easy. No message.
Ooh, real quick, how many messages are there? Because I have to pee very bad, and I'm trying to figure out, do I go now and come back, or do I wait?
There's a couple more. If you want to go, you can go. Probably be like another 10 minutes.
I'll be right back.
All
very
right.
quick.
Well, while Hannah is gone, let's pull up this super chat. Also, I'm trying to keep an eye on the new ones that are coming in because it's such an annoying update. I don't know why they did this. It just updated yesterday, and they improved some things. They did a lot of really good things, but this is like the weirdest outcome of that update. $4.99 from Travis Barber. Fuck me. I was so excited for my first super chat. I didn't type the message. So here's some more money. Love the show. And to Mr. Snow, go fuck yourself, Jimmy. I will make sure that Jimmy knows. We'll probably play Pal World with him after this because I've been fucking addicted to Pal World. And now we have a big dedicated server that a bunch of us are playing on. So I will make sure that he knows that he was told to go fuck himself on at least one occasion here today. I think he said he was going to watch today's episode, actually. So he might be hearing this right now. All right, let's see. Next one. We've got $5 from Higgy Shooting. It says, oop, I lost my place where I can actually read it. There we go. Hey.
Sorry about that.
No worries. Yeah, I should have mentioned pre-show. You absolutely are allowed to just like get up and go to the bathroom. $5 from Higgy Shooting. Have you heard of the anti-furry bill being proposed in Oklahoma? They're threatening to call animal control on kids pretending to be an animal. Oh my God. This is what I mean when I'm saying, like, I don't want to harp on Ricky because he does what we say the show is for. If you have questions, call in. But sometimes I'm kind of like, you've called in a lot, Ricky. Do you really need to have us answer this question for you? There's no way furries and non-binary teenagers are causing the problems. Conservatives are threatening to call animal control on kids like the kid of the parent from last week who, you know, wasn't communicating well before her mom was like, okay, you're a cat. And now she can communicate her kid's state of mind because she's letting her kid meow and hiss. Like, really, what's the fucking problem with that? Like, nobody's saying you have to truly internally believe that this child is a cat and not a human. Just be respectful of these people.
I think to some extent for like people like Ricky, who again, I want to point out too, like this show is a breath of fresh air for me considering what I normally do. Hearing anyone from a different perspective try and in good faith call in and get answers. Awesome. But it's so frustrating when you see someone, how do I put this? It feels like some people don't want to admit that there are just some people who hate things for silly reasons. Like they want to convince themselves like there's got to be some material thing someone is doing that's making like Republicans do this. If we could just change that thing, they'd stop, or like things would be better and things would be okay, because the reality of the situation is scarier and sadder and less easy to change. The reality is a lot of people have different like beliefs baked in due to society or their religious beliefs or, you know, where they grew up or how they grew up. And those things are not necessarily logical. A lot of them are dictated by fear and distrust of things that are different than the things they understand. So they lash out and find conspiratorial narratives to hang on to because maintaining their original worldview is more important to them than adapting to change.
Yeah.
I see that all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. So many people care far more about their own equilibrium than actually understanding the truth, which is really sad to me. I mean, I'm sure I do that too. I think it's a very natural human reaction to certain things, but I very much try to always consider the fact that I have the ability to be wrong and I can be incorrect on things.
Yeah.
I've said before in the show, I used to be a trans medicalist, and then I heard people make really good arguments about why being trans medicalist is fucking stupid. And I was like, oh shit, yeah, okay. That I can drop that part of my worldview. It's not useful, it's not true. Why would I hold on to it after somebody had made a strong argument for why it's not a good worldview to hold? And why it's like untrue. Oop, whack my mic, sorry. All right, we got $5 from Alyssa Nguyen. Century City is rather fancy, probably because it's near 90210. Last time I was there, I ate at Panda Express in a mall food court and got real plate and I can't see that emoji, pouring liquid. Real food and drink? Is that what you're trying to say?
Because I mentioned that show Century City. That's funny. That was a one-off. That was a show I mentioned that ran for one season that no one remembers but me.
Oh, right. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. It's on YouTube, by the way, if you want to watch it, anyone. Go watch it. It's fun, schlocky, sci-fi, speculative court cases from the early 2000s.
That would be interesting.
Sorry, I'm very into media things. And
oh, no, same.
All my movies and shit behind me.
Don't know that one, but I definitely... I feel like Matt might roast me because I have a terrible memory, but I've seen and heard a lot of things. But if you ask me, have you seen Title of X? I'm almost certainly going to say no. But then when you start playing it or making me listen to it, I'll be like, oh yeah, okay, that. My brain.
This is weird and random. Has Matt ever told you, like, I don't know if Matt's ever mentioned me at all. Matt and I, has he ever mentioned how he and I met?
Yeah, he did like one of the voices for one of your Chick Track things.
No, it was before that. And it was so funny how life is like weird full circle. I was at a convention, at like a college, and he was there. And this is when, me and my former like partner for the show were doing that. We literally brought like a flash drive of some episodes of our show to that conference and gave it to him. And I can't believe he plugged that into a computer. Thank you, Matt, for plugging that in and not assuming we were creeps.
No, he's actually, he reads like, this is why when people call in and they get a little upset sometimes, they want to call in and say thank you, for all you've done or something. And we say, please don't take up a line to say that because they'd be better served by an email. And I think a lot of people think, yeah, but nobody reads their emails. No, Matt literally reads every single one and compulsively responds to things like that. Like to the point where sometimes we'll start a show and 2 minutes in, he'll pause it for 20 minutes as he composes a response to certain things. So, I mean, I do that too, but yeah. Anyway. We've got $4.99 from Louise Richardson. On a hospital form in the U.S., you are asked to identify race. You can choose anything, but when it comes to sexual it just says ... race is not even scientific. Yeah, I've also been frustrated with medical facilities now. I've had this happen several times where they'll say, what was your sex assigned at birth? And it's like, oh, they're using our language. They're woke. They're cool with trans people. And then they ask you your gender and you put that in. But then on all my forms, it says male. And it's like, now, there may be some niche situations where being assigned male at birth might indicate different medical treatments or something. But that is also perfectly encapsulated by marking that I am a trans person. And I don't think you have to put that I'm male. And I also think there's pretty good evidence to suggest that in a lot of cases, the medical response to things is more aligned with their hormone profile than necessarily your sex assigned at birth, right? It's not a clean line. And I know Ben has mentioned that it may be the case that for trans people, sex-based indicators are neither aligned with male or female in most cases, and they're almost like their own category in a lot of ways. So it's a frustrating thing. I empathize with what you're trying to get at.
At minimum, I wish it was standardized because when I've gone to different doctors and, whatever, you ever have that thing where you're like, you got to ask, hey, for the thing, because I haven't had a situation where I've gone to doctors where they have a separate form like that on the thing where it says gender at birth versus sex. Mm-hmm. So I always have to be like, hey, so I'm trans. What do you want me to put here? Is this about the parts, or is this for how you were you know what I mean? You gotta, in fairness, it's gotten better. Just in the time I've come out in different medical places, it's been a lot better. But
yeah, I think
it hasn't caught up with the reality.
Right. It's funny too, because even so, I recently went to, I have a hearing condition. My hearing's bad and I get ear infections all the fucking time. I went to an emergency clinic recently and same thing happened. I had put male on my form, but indicated that I'm a woman. And I noticed that it said male on my paper. But then the doctor came in and was like, is there any chance you've been pregnant or anything like that? And it's it's really frustrating that it's you do this thing that hurts and invalidates me that doesn't necessarily give you any real medical benefit, but then you don't even read it and you make assumptions about me anyway. So it's what's the point of a lot of this stuff?
I get, and I've had that too. Literally, I had to, and no isn't enough of an answer sometimes. I don't know if this has happened to you. A nurse asked me that a while back. It was oh, when, or they asked, when was your last period or whatever? Because they're checking if I'm pregnant, And I'm like, never. And they're like, oh, what? Why? And it's what do you mean, why? I'll talk to, if I need to, I'll talk to the doctor, but you're just here, what?
Right.
I promise I would have brought it up if I thought it was an issue. I don't know. I find it frustrating anyway, because I find it, this is my own dysphoria, but I find it difficult that she did not know the reason.
Yeah.
But that's just me.
No, I totally empathize with that. Yeah, it's really frustrating. I could rant about medical stuff for a while. I'll resist the temptation because I have a whole other tangent I was about to go on, and I'm no, it's not even related to the super chat. Let's move on. We've got $5 from Mel. Yeah. My parents asked that I wait until they died to transition. I told them that I couldn't want them to die soon to go on with my life. Yeah, that is, I've heard this, a caller has called in before and mentioned something very similar where their parents were accepting, basically were it's going to be so difficult for you and for us and our community and our family. So wait till we die. And it's what an insanely selfish perspective to have. Yeah.
I have a wild thing. Sorry, I have a wild thing about this, and it pisses me off. I, came out to my mom and stuff. She was, actually, I wasn't even talking to her at the time, but we reconnected after I had come out, and she knew about it. At a certain point, I was considering coming out to my grandparents, who I think are better people than my parents. They just are. But my mom was like, please wait. She was legit like, they're going to die soon. Just don't tell them. Just don't tell them. Don't do that. And then yet I ended up cutting her off in part because of that, and then came out to my grandparents, and they've been far more accepting than she ever was. Like, it was a her issue. You know what I mean? Such
That's
bullshit.
so wild.
Makes me mad.
I don't even understand the reasoning. Like, wait until we die or wait until they die. Like, why? What about my transition is going to make them die faster or have a worse remaining years? Like, I would think that even if they don't accept me, they'd rather know the truth and go out being like, well, my queer kid is going to hell and I'm going to heaven, so bleh, or whatever. Like, you know, like, I don't know. I don't understand the reasoning even from an anti-trans perspective. Like, it doesn't make sense.
No.
This is the do you want to try to read this one? Like, I don't even think I can read this one.
Sure.
Okay.
The rest said N-1. No, I don't know how to read any of this. I thought I could struggle through it. I can't. What am I going to say? I could literally say open parentheses N exclamation point -1 close parentheses exclamation point times N exclamation point equals open parentheses N exclamation point close parentheses exclamation point close quotes.
I think that was
But that doesn't mean anything.
I think that was perfect. I think that was better than I could have done. So, you know, props.
Great.
We got $5 from Monkey at Typewriter in defense of the Oklahoma furry bill. I'd still rather idiot conservatives call animal control on kids than call the cops. We'd keep more kids alive.
I mean, is that the dichotomy? I don't know. We could just do neither. Also, someone says exclamation point is a factorial. Bold of you to assume I know what the fuck a factorial is.
That's so funny. Same. Yeah, I have no fucking clue. Also, like, will they be better at keeping kids alive? What is animal control gonna do? Like,
they're gonna put one of those things around them that old timey dog catchers had that had like a thing. But, I don't know. I genuinely don't.
Even if, like, you're a federal or a state employee or whatever as an animal control person and they say, this is the guidance, would you do it? Like, if you do that to me, then, like, if somebody shoots you, like, their parent, as you try to take them away, I'd be like, self-defense, you know? But I don't know. That's just fucking weird to me. I can't imagine anyone in their right mind being like, no, by the way, I'm not saying I want anyone to shoot anyone or anyone to die.
No.
I'm saying that's so insanely inhumane and psychotic that if somebody actually did that, I think they would deserve whatever was coming to them.
Yeah.
And assuming nobody proves me wrong, this is the last super chat of the day. 100, I think they're Norwegian crowns from Arsenic 1987. Love the show. Today's comm vibe was informative and nice, even without the usual heated calls. You guys, gals, assist greatly in fostering respectful discussions on trans issues. Go fuck yourself, Jimmy. Yeah. Yeah, that's funny. People do that all the time on the show. They'll say you guys and be like, I mean, gals, or like dudes, I mean, dudettes, or whatever. You know, they make that weird thing, and it's like, just, this isn't twitter.com right here. I'm not going to cancel you for every single purity test that you fail. In fact, the whole premise of the show is that you are likely to fail any purity test I would put up, and I'm trying to be empathetic towards that. So, like, but I appreciate when people are trying to be sensitive. So, yeah. Thank you, though. I thought it was a really good show, too. I think not everyone was on our side, but everyone was just interested in conversing and understanding rather than necessarily, like, butting heads. Doesn't make for the best clips, but it makes for a better day for me. Everyone loves the bigot destroyed by logic kind of titles, you know? All right, we've got $5 from Melissa again. I'm guessing the panda emoji is Panda Express with real forks, plates, and drink glasses at a mall food court. 90210 equals Beverly Hills. Yeah, and Dr. Beverly Hills Drive 90210 does breast aug, vaginoplasty, labiaplasty on any woman. That's cool. Like, not needing the absurd extra hoops that cis women don't have to jump through kind of makes it available, or like they'll do surgery on trans women, but they also have those extra hoops. I don't necessarily think that gatekeeping is always bad, by the way, specifically with medical procedures and surgery, but I do think in most cases for trans people, it is excessive and unnecessary. Like, it's not justified, you know. It could be justified, but they haven't done the work to justify it. I've
been on hormones for like 3 or 4 years, and I have to switch providers soon for an insurance thing. And yet, new people I call to be like managing my prescriptions and stuff, still, even though I've been on hormones for years, I have completely socially transitioned. I've changed my name. Like, no, they still want my old therapist letters from years ago. Like, really? You think right now is the point where I'm like, nah, never mind. I'm not feeling it. The heels weren't for me. Like, what? Like, what do you think I'm doing?
Yeah.
I'm a fucking adult. I'm almost 30. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, exactly. And like, even if, like, in my mind, I don't care if a cis man wants to get a boob job. Like, if a cisgender man wants to have silicone titties, like, I don't give a fuck. So, like, why are we putting this restraint on trans women? Like, it just seems not appropriate or justified. Okay. But potentially the last super chat again, although you guys love to send in some right when I say that. It's maybe part of why I say that every time. $5 from Larry Fishman. Factorial means the product of all positive integers less than or equal to a given positive integer. See, I am so math illiterate that I couldn't even process the words that you just said, even though you did it in plain English.
Okay, so I understand that positive integers are like whole numbers, right? Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. These are integers, right? So it's the product of all positive whole numbers less than or equal. Nope. I thought I could do it. Can't work it out. Not worth it.
The thing I was trying to think of
doing
earlier,
math using words.
Right. The thing I was trying to think of earlier is just calcula. It's like the analogous to dyslexia, but it's like I have such a hard time following numbers in the abstract. Give me behavioral statistics. Love that, because I'm applying it to real world things, and I can be like, oh, this medicine has this statistical impact on this population. That I can totally jam with. But the second you start giving me factorial means the product of all positive integers less than or equal to a given positive integer, it's just gobbledygook. It's not. No. It's abstract. It doesn't mean anything to me, and you have to like connect it to something real. Anyway, that was the last super chat. So yes, thank you guys so much for showing up here today. Thank you to all the super chatters and to all the regular chatters. I still love you even if you don't give us money. Thank you to our mods for keeping the chat clean and respectful.
I don't give money.
That's right. Sorry. And thank you to the callers. Everyone was great today. So yeah, Hannah, do you want to plug your stuff one last time before we wrap it up here?
I'd love to. I'm actually going to go stream like right after this. I'm going to take like a 10-minute break. So if you want, you can join me over on twitch.tv/Hannah Reloaded or youtube.com/Hannah Reloaded. And I'm going to be talking about, don't know what. Today's probably going to be pretty loose. But generally, I talk about current events, cults, conspiracy theories, debunking them, the psychology of them. It's a lot of fun. It's a fun time. It's a great space, and we have a very cool safe space Discord. So join that too. You'd like.
Awesome.
I don't know. What if I juggle? If I juggle, does it help? I'm entertaining. I promise.
Oh yeah. Okay. This is exactly up your alley. Go watch this as soon as this is done. Thank you, Hannah, so much for being here. It was awesome. We're definitely going to get you back soon if you're up for it, because I had a great time.
Very much. I had a great time.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful day, and we will see you all next time. And if you want to get your name on the scrolling list of patron producers, go to patreon.com/calltheline to support us. We really appreciate it.